Hello and welcome to episode number 258 of the Board Game Barrage podcast, a podcast about board games, the latest hotness, how to have fun with your friends, even when you're losing. I am joined by my friends Neilan and Mark as we count down the top 50 board games of all time. Guitar riff, right? Right, Neilan?
Yeah, exactly.
Bobbing along.
Yeah, I'll send it.
So low. Oh, wow. A man of many talents. Today finds us on board games number 30 to 21. It's hard. This is the middle child, right? But again, of all of our games in existence, of which we've played thousands, these are some of the best ever. So you say, I'll wait for the top 20. No. This could be someone else's top 10.
That's
These
right.
are probably better than all the games you own, listeners. Probably don't insult them, huh? But we are going to kick things off. We're going to go round robin style. We're going to try to keep it to 1 minute or less of description. We're going to talk about the board games that have changed and shaped our lives and made us who we are today. So it'll be a game and then the story of how it changed our life and so on and so forth. We are going in an order, and I don't know what that order is because they change it on me every episode.
Literally the same order every episode.
What is the order again?
I'm starting.
Oh, and then I'm in the middle.
That's right. You're the middle
And then
child
Neilan.
of the middle episode.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Mark, why don't you kick us off with the 30th best board game of all time?
Well, the story of my 30th favorite game of all time is the story of how you changed my life, Kellen.
Oh.
This is an homage to you because number 30 for me is a double crossover with none other than the Red Tank himself. He mentioned it on the last episode. My 30th favorite game of all time is Traders of Genoa, a game I had never heard of before Kellen mentioned it on one of the shows. Finally got a chance to play it and absolutely fell in love with it. This is my favorite Euro plus negotiation game of all time. I do love Sidereal Confluence, which was number 45 for me, but not as much as I love Traders of Genoa. This is up 5 spots from last year. Kellen mentioned this on the last episode, but Traders of Genoa is a Euro game where you're trying to get resources and fulfill contracts, do all that kind of stuff. But everything is up for negotiation. How the pieces move, the different places you can go, everything's up for negotiation. Just hilarious, super fun. The one gripe I have about it is I wish it was a little bit shorter, but still not enough to knock it down from number 30 for me, Traders of Genoa, my 30th favorite game of all time.
Yeah, one that could use a refresh, redo, and a little shortening, and wow.
Perfect. Yeah,
we could have
great.
Ourselves. But this is a you game. I get it. I get you. I'm feeling you.
There you go.
All right. My 30th favorite board game of all time is a double crossover with one Mark Basada. This is the unkillable Splendor. And even this year, the pride of the designer to try to kill his own child with Splendor Duel. But it could not be done. The 2-player Splendor could not kill the daddy Splendor. I think there's something inherently that it's impossible to kill Splendor because at the beginning of the game, you're struggling to even get a single card. And then you get that card, and from now on, all ruby cards cost 1 less. And suddenly you're looking at the board, and you're like, I could take any one of these cards for free. Does anyone not understand how powerful I am right now? And that feeling is addicting. And every game, you're like, well, if I could just get a little bit faster, I could just be picking up the cards. And suddenly the economy of it is actually that just taking the turn is worse. It's not that you couldn't afford to spend it, it's that you can't afford the tempo and the timing considerations. Splendor Duel is a fantastic 2-player game, by the way. Absolutely amazing. But I love Splendor. I could not see myself ever parting with it. A great gateway game.
Yeah, we talk a lot about purity on the podcast and like purity of designs, and like Splendor Duel is engine building at its like purest in a way that is very satisfying.
We talk a lot about purity of soul. Also, purity of spirit.
That too.
And our crest that just appeared, right? Gameplay above all.
My 30th favorite game is a game that Kellen spoke about last episode. This is Azul. Azul is slipping very slightly on my list, down 3 spots, but I love Azul. I have played this in the last year a bunch of times and only reaffirmed how fantastic Azul is. I sort of had an experience with this having played this with someone who had played it once before and probably played it with a much kinder group and was kind of brought around to the idea of how cruel Azul can be. And kind of like I mentioned last episode, it flexes both ways. I do think that base Azul, the original Azul, is the best Azul. I do think that the later designs get more puzzly and more intricate, but they also somewhat get a little bit less interactive. Like the purity of being able to focus on what other players need and hurt them in ways that they don't see coming is so inherent to that original version of Azul. But yeah, this is a fantastic game, fantastic production, lovely tactile bits. Azul.
You mentioned purity there, Neilan, and I just want to reiterate how important purity is to us.
Purity is very important to us.
Purity of game, purity of soul.
Exactly.
I don't get it, but I'm assured that this is funny.
My 29th favorite game of all time is the second appearance by none other than Dr. Knizia on my list. This is Modern Arts. I love auction games, and if you like auction games, this is the auction game for you. Modern Art is a game about auctioning and buying pieces of art, and more about the theme later, which I think Knizia is often accused about pacing on theme, but I think the theme of Modern Art really works. But to get back to the mechanics, if you like auctioning, this is a game where every action is basically an auction. The game has 5 different types of auctions, so it's just chock full of auctions. And to go back to the theming, you are acquiring art, and the value of the art is tied to how many pieces that artist sold that round, which I always love. It sort of feels evocative of the theme. And there's the idea that pieces of art can become worthless if artists don't sell any in a particular phase, and then all of a sudden come back into prominence and sort of build on their previous reputation if they become popular once again. Feels like a very, very sharp criticism / take on the art world and on the speculation world in general. Just a game I love for a number of reasons. Number 29, up 1 spot from last year, Modern Art.
I speculated on the Oink version of this, Mark.
Oh, yeah, that's
Not
right.
the new Modern Art, but the OG stamps.
Right.
So what does that say about me?
It says that you are a prime speculator. Mr. Knizia would be proud. Although I don't know how much of a cut he gets, so maybe he wouldn't care. He probably wouldn't care, actually.
Probably doesn't get a cut of the secondary market. Most expensive board game I've ever bought, folks. Stamps. One Reiner Knizia, Oink Games. I guess it has all the makings of something that would trick me out of my money. My 29th favorite board game of all time is another Only True and Living Dr. Reiner Knizia game. This is the underrated, underappreciated Taj Mahal. I know that some of us may speak about this at a future time, but it combines some disparate elements in a way that feels unlike anything else. You are ostensibly playing poker hands, sort of, and deciding when to withdraw for which benefit that you want, all while sort of planning out a long-term route building, strategic connections across the board game. This feels novel and also perfect for a group of Euro gamers who are looking for something a little wild or just a little different or a little outside the norm. So I will never turn down a game of Taj Mahal. I could never see myself parting with it, and just really enjoy the turn-by-turn play of the tactile nature of it. And then I enjoy getting in the long-term sense because I'm not good at planning out my route.
I think that gets to the heart of it, actually. I can't think of many games that combine that sort of having to look ahead down to, every round is mapped out. I'm going to look ahead to 10 and be like, this is what I'm going to do. And then realizing, oh no, Kellen me, now what? And having to pivot from there. And it handles both sides of that coin so spectacularly. My number 29th favorite game of all time is Gaia Project. This is my preferred game in the Terra Mystica universe, as it were. This is a game about having a shared map and planning out your empire. In this case of Gaia Project, that is a spacefaring empire across multiple planets where you're potting down mining colonies, and you're turning those mining colonies into trading outposts, and then those trading outposts into larger and larger escalating buildings in order to expand the victory point potential at the end of the game of your town. But you're all competing over planets that other people will also be interested in. Your ability to sort of terraform those planets to your own utility is determined by this incredible sequence of tech tracks, which is, I think, the single improvement that I love of this over Terra Mystica, where you have these tech tracks that determine all your abilities to terraform, to expand in order to gain resources. We spoke about engine building with Splendor. This is engine building taken to the nth degree. putting out buildings to get more resources, to put out buildings to get more resources, to put out buildings. And watching your empire grow across the map at the expense of other players is really, really something to behold. Lots of cool asymmetric factions with very distinct powers. Gaia project.
This is a game that I wish I got a chance to play in person. I just wonder if it's a game for me. I tried playing it, tried learning it for the first time via BGA asynchronously. Feels like not the ideal way to try it, and sure enough, did not have a great time with it. But I feel like it's might be a game for me, just have not played it under the right circumstances, I think. My 28th favorite game of all time, I believe, was the Board Game Barrage Game of the Year back when we were doing that of 2018 or 2019. I can't remember. This is up 8 spots to 28. This is another Knizia, so 2 Knizias in a row. Blue Lagoon. Reiner has done a lot of re-implementations of earlier games, the aforementioned Yellow and Yangtze being sort of a re-implementation of Tigris and Euphrates. Blue Lagoon in a lot of ways is a re-implementation of Through the Desert, which is a route-building sort of Go-like, if you're familiar with the ancient game of Go. Go-like game where you're trying to connect paths from one side of the board to the other. In the case of Blue Lagoon, it's not so much about fencing your opponents in as it is about reaching different resources as well as connecting different islands. I love games that give you really tough choices with not a lot of rules, and Blue Lagoon is like the embodiment of that for me. A lot of times in Blue Lagoon, your difficulty is clear. I need to get to that island and I need to get to that resource, but I know that if I don't do both at the same time, which is obviously possible, Kellen or Neilan can take an action, and therefore my tempo, my advantage there is lost. And so I have to figure out which route to take, which piece to place. And I just love the excruciating clarity of it. Like, there's not like a lot of calculation. It's like, I need to get to that. If I don't place a piece there, then Kellen can get to jump on me, and what am I going to do? Just love it. Played it again this year and was, again, just blown away by how much I enjoyed it. Number 28 for me, up 8 spots, Blue Lagoon.
Yeah, this would be on my list if there wasn't a newer, more better, similar, only true and living Dr. Reiner Knizia game, which we will get to this week. Later in the list. All right, my number 28th favorite board game of all time is new to the list. It is a Japanese trick-taking game. This game is called Boast or Nothing, and it is fantastic. I don't believe I've even had time to describe this to Mark and Neilan, but have had the chance to play it over 10 times over the course of this past year. It is a extremely simplistic trick-taking game where there are 3 suits, red, blue, and yellow, and they have a hierarchy of trump, meaning there's discs that represent each color, and whatever color wins the suit, that color goes to the bottom of the pile and becomes the worst scoring card, so the others become more valuable and become trump. You combine that with a very simplistic system of winning tricks, which is that if you get an exact amount of tricks, you will score 1 point, and if you get no tricks, you will score 2 points, and that's it. So it is not possible for everyone to win their tricks. The trump changes every time, and there's a middle trump that beats the bottom trump. Each hand of this is only 7 cards long, and there are 2 pass cards, which I find hysterical. You can think that you've won no tricks, and there's no possible way. You play the lowest card in the game, and then the 2 players that you're playing with play pass cards, and you get and you take the trick, and you unfortunately don't get any points. Boast or Nothing is a gem of a design. It is a beautiful little production, and one that is definitely worth seeking out. Spectacularly good. I am shocked at how good and clean Boast or Nothing is.
I had never heard of this game, so I'm very eager to check it out.
I think people sometimes abbreviate it BON on like trick-taking lists. I'm not exactly sure what's happening on the cover. Like, each card has unique art, but like it's all about like boasting. It's very bizarre, very, very bizarre little production thing, but definitely worth playing, and one that I got played over and over again at PAX and a couple other conventions.
My number 28 favorite game of all time is Kemet. There are a bunch of different troops in the map game that like represents on my list, but like when I sort of think about like how I sort of divide them in my mind, there's kind of like the big and splashy, something like a Dead Reckoning, not that that's a troop in the map game, but where the combat just kind of feels silly. And there's kind of like the very, very methodical, very tight area of this, like stuff like an Inish and stuff like Kemet, where you don't roll dice, you have a subset of cards that determine your combat ability, and utilizing those effectively as an exercise in hand management and sort of planning out your combats that are going to play in a given round. It's all very, very deterministic, with the exception of like subtle boosts that come through the Divine Intervention cards. But the very key selling point for Kemet is this sort of array of abilities you have. So you can go hard into the red abilities, which are very aggression focused. You can go hard into the blue abilities, which are very defense focused. And what you end up building by sort of acquiring these ability tiles is a very, very unique fabricated faction that feels unique to you and different every game, depending on how you choose to mix and match those different ability tiles. I love Kemet. It is fantastic. It has big monsters that you can get out into the board, which do make an impact. But otherwise, it is just a very, very tight dudes in the map style design. That is Kemet.
Kemet has dropped off my list. I don't know if it's the fact that I've played maybe less Dudes on the Map game this year, or if it is when Dudes on the Map games have come up, it's not been Kemet. I enjoy everything about Kemet. In theory, just have not been able to get it to the table in practice, and it just caused it to drop off the list. But it was definitely a tough cut from my list for sure.
Yeah, fun little fact, actually. This is a game that, despite the fact that I have not played as much as I want, has jumped up a couple of spots. It just represents like how much I really do want to keep playing Kemet. We played a game of this, I think, at Dice Tower West maybe a couple of years ago. And that really invigorated just how much I really enjoy Kemet and how much I want to keep returning to it.
Before I get into my 27th favorite game of all time, I just looked up Boast or Nothing, Kellen, and it's the same designer as Patch History, which is a game that I've never played, but it's like one of the most intriguing games that I've wanted to play forever. Have you ever played Patch History? I've heard really interesting things about it.
I haven't, but I've always wanted to.
Okay.
I recently picked that up, actually. I haven't played it yet, but I'm excited to, because it's kind of like Civ-themed in a way that seemed really novel and neat.
Yeah, cool. Okay, my 27th favorite game of all time. We've had a couple Knizias. Now we're going with a Shavatal. Neilan, can we get a Shavatal for a bit from you?
I'm going to say Gvatal. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I knew I was saying it wrong. Anyway, number 27 is down a couple spots, but is one of my favorite party games, although it'd be a sort of a rough party if you were playing Pictomania, but I love Pictomania. Pictomania is Pictionary, but instead of drawing and then having your teammates guess, you are simultaneously drawing and guessing at the same time. I love it. I love that aspect of it, which is like the crazy drawing and guessing at the same time. I also love how obscure and how high the difficulty of the words you're trying to guess can ramp up. Like the way we've always played it is you start the first round, we play base level, like lowest level cards, which is like cat, dog, stuff like that. And then the highest level cards, which we get to at the end, is like time, and or I guess time would be easy to draw. You draw a clock, but it could be like past, present, or future, like just stuff like that. It could be very like esoteric things to draw. Just have always loved Pictomania. It's like a Pictionary again, like to the 10th degrees. It's just a ramped up Pictionary. I actually also like introducing it to non-gamers because of that, the simplicity of the cell. It's like Pictionary, guessing, drawing at the same time. It always blows people away. It can be very stressful, so not for everyone, but a game I love. Down 5 spots, but still 27th, Pictomania.
I love Pictomania. My 27th favorite board game of all time is the superior version of everyone's favorite card game of the year, Scout, which, did it win the Spiel des Jahres like 4 years after it came out? Some weird, anyway, it got re-released by Oink Games. There's actually another game in this trilogy that I got to play called Hachi Train, where the central conceit of this game is that you can't reorder the cards in your hand as you're playing a game. In Delt or Krass Kariert, there is one loser as opposed to one winner. I find this game to be hilarious and just the right level of party-ish fun while playing with cards. That is my ranking. My ranking would be Krass Kariert, then Scout, then Hachi Train. But these are all really solid games, and the conceit of not being able to reorder your hand is really fun because you kind of play a combo in order to put another combo together that's even better, or you pick up that one card you need and put it in the exact spot within your hand. I think this is still an underexplored design space and look forward to more games that kind of crib on this system. That is Krass Kariert or Delt, my 27th favorite board game of all time.
My 27th favorite game of all time is kind of hovering around where it was last year. This is Werewords. This is a social deduction game that is kind of mixed with 20 questions. So you are given a word, usually by the app, which is quite very well designed for the purposes of this game. And as the mayor, you are fielding questions from the other players. So you might ask, is this smaller than my house? Can I buy this on Amazon? Is this living? Is this something that is science-y or natural? And the mayor is answering questions just by handing out chits, yes, no, maybe, in order to get the team closer to what the word is. But the key twist to this is that some of the players are werewolves, and they are trying to mislead the other players. They don't want the people in the town to get the word. It's a lot of fun. It's a very good introduction to social deduction because it just maps social deduction into a game that everyone is typically very intimately familiar with. And I have found such huge success with this with non-gaming groups. It kind of feels a little bit like a party trick that I bring out when people are like, hey, what's a fun little game we can play? We don't play a lot of board games. I'm just like, well, let's try this. It's going to seem something like something you've played before, but there's a twist to it that is going to make it feel like completely different. It's like introducing social deduction to players that have never experienced something like that. Is just something that I really, really, really relish.
For me, Werewords falls in the same category as games like Hanabi and Codenames. Just games that I always feel like, okay, I played that enough, I'm burnt out on it, but then I bring it out and just have a great time. It's very, very rare that I bring Werewords out and people don't love it, so I'm with you there.
Werewords falls in that category for me, where when it's stolen from another game designer, I can't.
I was hoping we'd get that. So I've talked about modern art earlier. This is another art game, but instead of Mr. Knizia, this is Mr. Lacerda making his second appearance on my list. This is the Gallerist, which is my favorite of the Lacerda games. In the Gallerist, you play as a art dealer slash museum creator slash artist manager, and that's part of the reason I like it so much. Is I think it evokes the art world in a pretty cool way. Like, you're trying to draw people to your museum, you're also trying to, which is probably my favorite part, prop up artists. You can stake your reputation on artists to get them more popular, to get their art being more valuable, which is like the economic aspect of the game. And again, like the best Lacerda games, all you do on your turn is take one action and then all the wheels start turning, all the gears start turning. Again, it can go badly in games like Escape Plan, but when it goes well, like in games like Lisboa, I think he does it really, really well. A lot of planning, a lot of like puzzliness, but also another lush production that I think really evokes the theme. Number 26 on my list, up 2 spots, is The Gallerist.
All right, my 26th favorite board game of all time has fallen a few spots, but may remove my gamer cred, because in order to be a cool board game reviewer, you have to like Hansa Teutonica. It is, again, 26th favorite game ever, but still going down. This is a very tight but really unique game of expanding your ability to take actions on this board by function of blocking other players. So you'll be building routes along a route, and then another player can say, no, I want that spot. But in actuality, it helps you almost more to get bumped than it does to be the one bumping. And so you go on a quest to get bumped all across the board. And so, you know, when someone is being a little trolly, they just sort of set their workers in front of every path that you can tell all the other players need, and then they get bumped, and then they get to do the best with what's left. So there is an interesting tension between doing exactly what you want less efficiently, or doing really good actions, but more efficiently by function of being blocked by other players who are forcing your hand. Hansa Teutonica, my 26th favorite board game of all time.
Better to be the bumpy than the bumper. You can put that on the box, right?
I think I saw that on the new big box, actually, like a box quote. But we'll definitely be talking about it at some point down the line. I think perhaps twice more. It's a fantastic game, like old school Euro that really, really holds its own in 2022.
Neilan, were you the one who played one of the other maps?
Yeah, that actually like really, really did a lot to like reaffirm like how solid the design is, because, you know, I have had issues with the base map and just sort of some quirks about the way it's designed, but I do think that a lot of that gets resolved by the other maps. It just basically reaffirms like, hey, this design is solid as hell and flexible to like other disparate like scenarios, as it were. My 26th favorite game of all time is fallen a few spots. This is Patchwork. One of the things we always talk about on this podcast is purity of game design and purity of soul. And Patchwork has both. This is like the purest form of polyomino game design. It is as simple as choose a polyomino, place it on your board, and cover as much space as possible by the end of the game. I think the brilliant masterstroke of Patchwork is its incredible time versus resources system, where at any given time, a patch that you're going to be placing on your board either costs a certain number of buttons or is also going to cost a certain amount of time. If you have more time available, you can take multiple turns in a row until you catch up with your other player. But there is a strict limit on how much time you have before you basically run out of turns and you have to stop placing patches on your board. And so that trade-off between the two resources effectively is like the brilliance of this game.
You only have base Patchwork, or do you have all the different colored versions like Americana and Halloween, Valentine's, Christmas?
I have the original that I've sort of like got little blue plastic buttons for, which is a very, very easy pimp up your game that you can do. But yeah, I love like the new versions that have come out, like all the like the different themed Halloween versions, for example, with like the cool little googly eyes. I love that.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine playing with the base one now.
Wow, harsh. I do know that they've actually been rebalancing it in recent versions as well, like sort of just slightly changing the costs of various tiles. So I probably should pick up one of the newer versions at some point.
That's why Kellen likes the new ones, because it's not about the aesthetics. He just wants a more pure,
all about
purity
gameplay.
Yeah, he just
they're just only Uwe can sell you a patch for a game and convince you that it's worth buying. He's a genius over here.
My 25th favorite game of all time is not an Uwe game, but it is up 8 spots. This is Glenmore 2 Chronicles. The thing I love about Glenmore 2 is that it is the Chronicles, but also the fact that it has all the trappings of a generic Euro game, but has some really, really fun, interesting twists. The first one being one of my favorite things in all of board games, which is the idea that you can move your worker up as far as you want up a path to get like the really juicy rewards. But if you do that, you can never go back and you're leaving everything else behind. So you're sacrificing tempo and ability to accumulate for something that's really, really nice now. I always love that choice whenever a game affords it to you. The other thing I think that does really, really interestingly is the way to scoring. So there's scoring at the end of every round, and the way you're scored is not how many things you have, but how many things you have in relation to your opponents. So as long as you're leading something, then you're going to get the most points for it. And so you're always incentivized to be on the lookout for how other players are doing it. It fosters engagement and just making sure that you block people when you need to and that you sacrifice something if you know you're going to lose it. It's a very engaging game, and again, does Euro in some really interesting ways. The second version, the second edition, Glenmore 2, is another really, really wonderful production. The Chronicles part of it is the fact that it has like 8 sort of modular things you can use to change the rules and add new cards. I think none of that stuff is actually necessary. Just the base game itself is wonderful. Glenmore 2, love it. My 25th favorite game of all time, Chronicles. Glenmore 2, Chronicles. I know how much you love a colon.
Thank you.
Big colon.
I just want you to feel bad for liking a game called Glenmore 2, Chronicles. It just rolls right off the tongue. If you can believe it, my 25th favorite board game of all time is a Japanese card game called Startups. The Oink games have had a falling out on my list. Let me double check. I think this is the highest rated one. Yep, it is. Startups is just a filler of a card game, a gem of a design. I love everything about this, from the graphic design to the gameplay, where you are trying to have the most of a suit, but you get paid out by the player who has the second most and third most of the suit. So you don't want to reveal what you're doing too early. And in fact, if you get an early lead in a suit, you get the anti-monopoly chip, which forces you to not be able to take that card as a face-up card. You're trying to obfuscate and hide what suits you're actually interested in and investing in these companies. There are long histories and stories about each of these companies in our game, whether it's Octo Coffee or Bow Wow Games, where Neilan works, or Flamingo Soft, the condom company that is pretending to be a software company. Startups is a beautiful color scheme. Everything about it I love. And if you said as a product, it might be my favorite object in all of board game is the card game Startups from Oink Games.
Startups is one of those games that gets broken out of conventions a lot by us because it's almost always just in Kellen's bag, and every time I return to it, I just am reminded like what a delight it is.
It's good. You guys don't like it because you're trying too hard to get heavier and heavier on the table. We all know you're men, you're manly men. You can like startups.
My 25th favorite game of all time is a double crossover with Kellen, and we already know that Mark has been cool enough to strike this from his list. This is Codenames. Codenames is as close as you can get to a modern classic. This has actually fallen about 10 spots on my list, so it is definitely moving down in the sense that, I don't know, this style of word game I felt like we had a glut of them this year especially, and I'm kind of losing my enthusiasm for them a little bit. But Codenames is like as close as you can come to one of the most accessible, delightful party games there is. Something I said a lot about Codenames in the past is just how it caters itself so uniquely to every group of players that plays it. The clues that you have to devise have to work for your players. So it's not enough to be descriptive. It's not enough to sort of find a clue that's universally good. It has to be a clue that works for the players that you're giving that clue to, which kind of means that you can flex towards video games if you're among that sort of crowd, or other similar sort of interests that those people have. It's a game that rewards inventiveness. Like Mark said, anytime I play Codenames, I am just enthralled by how good it is for how simple a design it is. That is Codenames.
You mock me for it being dropped off my list, and yet you're saying it's falling like a stone on your list. So next year you might be
like
where I'm
so it's fallen a little bit.
10 spots, that is a fall.
A little
fall
bit.
From grace. My 24th favorite game of all time, I owe my love for, and this is the third highest brand new game on my list. So this is a big splash here, but I owe it to two things. One, my new residence, and two, the Red Tank himself. This is a double crossover with Kellen because this is Lords of Vegas.
Oh, wow. I did not know this was this high. Wow.
I loved it. He's already mentioned everything about it, but it's just a game, again, where you blend what you're looking for from a standard or what you think of as a board game, like those Euro aspects of planning and all that stuff, but you mix it with dice rolling and area control and fighting over casinos and walking into somebody else's casino and just trying to take their money, just try to beat them at their own casino. It's a game where you have big swings, which is what you're looking for with a game that's based or that's themed around Vegas and gambling and stuff like that. But yet it doesn't feel like it's off the rails. It feels like the structures are there. It's very sound, but super, super fun. Got a chance to play it for the first time this last year and loved it. Absolutely loved it. I think this is another game to add to our list for Dice Tower West because I think this is a game that will work perfectly for us. I think we'll have a great time playing Lords of Vegas. Loved it. Absolutely love it.
It is a shame this one has weird Kickstarters where they're like offering the base game. It's like weird to get a hold of for whatever reason.
Yeah.
They need to do a new version with new production, but they like keep kickstarting the old version. It's very odd.
I agree. It's very, very weird. That is very weird.
My number 24 favorite board game of all time is perhaps one that I most on my wish I have played more of. This is the brutal auction game Keyflower, where you are bidding on tiles that you want to incorporate into your tableau, and you have a variety of different colors with which to bid. There are so many choices on your turn in Keyflower, which is, do I want to bid on a tile? Do I want to use a worker placement space? Things get more expensive the longer you go. And then not only that, which color worker do I want to bid? And then there are certain types of meeples that are harder to acquire than others. So it's easier if you start a bid in green, it's going to be harder for other people to steal that tile from you. And so there are so many considerations in a game of Keyflower that I just find this one endlessly fascinating, not to mention the tableau itself that you're building and sort of going towards endgame scoring. I think that for being such a Euro, the tightness of this auction and the fun that comes out or the groans that come out when you trump someone's bid is unmatched. Terrible rule book, kind of frustrating iconography in some cases, and a little bit more tactical than strategic. You can kind of get got by what comes out in the third phase as it goes from spring, summer, fall, winter, but really just an amazing game that combines a lot of different elements. Keyflower, my 24th favorite board game of all time.
There's something that's just so devious about the very simple idea of like, what if your worker placements were also the things that you had to bid with? And like, it's just such a cool idea.
It's a game that I always feel I'm going to like more whenever I play it, and I always enjoy it, but it never really clicks for me quite.
My 24th favorite game is also an auction game, perhaps one of the purest auction games. This is a new entry on my list. This is Dr. Knizia's Ra. I went way too long without playing Ra, and I ended up playing a bunch of it last year and really, really, really just grew to absolutely adore it. At its simplest, you're bidding on commodities, and like commodities that give you points in different ways, whether they're points immediately or points at the end of the game. They score in a variety of different ways. Some will combo off each other to get you more points if you collect a bunch of them. Some of them are just flat points. But at any given time, you're evaluating kind of like the tableau of these different tiles and how they're going to work for you, how they're going to work for other players. And the pure genius of this game is that in any given round, you have a sum total of 3 bids you can make. Once you've made 3 bids, you're effectively out of the round, and the value of those bids is going to depend on what tiles you were able to bid on in the previous round. So in any given round, you're not just bidding for the tiles, but also setting yourself up for the next round by taking tiles that other people have added to the pool. It's such a very simple, brilliant design that gets to the heart of what I love about auction games. Just sort of staring down someone at the other end of the table and be like, you can't take this from me. I need this more than you do. And hoping desperately that ends up being the case.
I absolutely love Ra. For all the reasons you said, I just think it's such a great auction game.
I've only played it once, and I actually think I would like it more the more I play it. So there's a little bit of like push your luck in it, right? Where you can just get got by it, but like it's not that long either.
No, exactly. It doesn't overstay its welcome at all.
And the push your luck part of it can make for some really exciting moments on the table. Like when you're looking for a tile to come out, and if the next tile is one of the like the raw tiles or whatever that ends the round, and you're just hoping for one more tile to come out, that can be just a really exciting moment in Raw. My 23rd favorite game of all time is the biggest riser on the list from games that were on last year. This is up 25 spots, and this is, I guess, my favorite solo game on my list. This is Marvel Champions. If you told me that I would have a Marvel-themed game on my top 50 list a couple years ago, I would not have believed you, but I love Marvel Champions as a solo game. What I'm looking for in a solo game is like a tough game, and Marvel Champions can be scaled to being, simple to tough. So I always play it at the highest level, but also different experiences. And that's what I love about Marvel Champions. You pick a hero, you pick a villain, and every time, assuming you pick different heroes and villains, it's going to be a much different experience. You have some heroes that are sort of tanks that you're trying to build up and strengthen, like Iron Man starts with nothing, but you can build a suit and be very strong and have very powerful actions at the end. Or you can have characters that are more about a number of different attacks immediately, and just every hero you play with feels different. I love the fact that there are a ton of expansions, and the expansions are pretty cheap and pretty simple to get, and they just give every game a different feeling. And the same goes with the villains. Some villains are you need to attack immediately and jump right on, or they're going to get out of hand, and some you have to gradually attack. I just love it. It just gives like a really fun experience in a very short amount of time. I'm not the biggest Marvel fan in the world, but I know enough about it that also adds to the flavor of the game. So 23 for me is Marvel Champions, the card game.
Funny story, Mark. When I was looking at like our previous lists as just like some point of reference, I saw this on your list last year and thought, yeah, that's not going to be in his list next year. That was like a fly-by-night for Mark. There's no way. I would never have anticipated this went higher on your list, and that's awesome. I have this. I still haven't played it, and I am now more excited than ever to check it out.
I mean, there's something to be said, right? If there's a common core system that still has novelty injected into it,
right?
It's the 18xx of solo games.
That's right.
That's a quote from you, Mark.
That is a quote. Put that on the box.
That's what you wrote to me and still told me to say.
That's right.
All right. My 23rd favorite board game of all time is a huge riser on my list and is Friedman Friese's best game ever created by him. This is Fuji Flush. This is... Are you kidding me? Fuji Flush? Have you ever not had a good time playing Fuji Flush? Yeah.
You said some big things there. You said some big things.
I said some big things. Yeah, I'm a big man. I say big things.
You're a big boy. Okay? Big boy saying big things.
No, that's not what I said. That is not what I said. Fuji Flush is a party card game where you will immediately be screaming at your friends to sort of join in your hand. You are trying to get rid of all the cards in your hand, but in order to do that, you can't have other players play higher cards than you, but they can join you on your quest to discard cards. Card for card, I don't think there is a game that has brought more joy to me in a shared group setting. This is the perfect game for a group of board gamers looking to chill out and play a card game and have some fun at the end of the night or at the beginning of the night, as long as you are willing to commit. If you commit to the bit, Fuji Flush is an amazing one. I had a number of people at PAX Unplugged this year just mention how they play Fuji Flush just like we do with the two-train, the choo-choo train, which I just find very, very delightful. Just a great, great card game that you should check out. Fuji Flush.
Friedman Freese strikes me as a guy who's much like Martin Wallace. Every game that comes out of his, not necessarily going to be great, and I guess he does have some stinkers in there, but always feels like there's the possibility of something completely fresh.
Yep, and I would never say no. And there was one or two at PAX Unplugged that I was mad I didn't get to try, so yes, totally with you. Maybe even above Martin Wallace, I feel like he releases less games. Maybe that's not true, but that's my instinct.
Yeah.
The 23rd best game on my list it's not actually my highest deduction game, but it is Search for Planet X. Is definitely one of my
What kind
favorites.
of deduction?
I think this one is actual deduction and not induction. Thank you, Kellen. This is a app-driven game where let's call it the scenario is dictated to you by an app, which is going to determine which of the sectors on this board, of this circular board, Planet X is at. Also, in each of these sectors, there are going to be asteroids, there are going to be gas clouds, nebulae, and like the idea is that what you're trying to do is ascertain the positions of each of these by taking a variety of actions where you're going to ask the app, hey, I want to scan between here and here and tell me if this is represented in that sector. Or you could take an action that tells you just very specifically hunt in one sector and tell me exactly what's there. But there are some of these celestial bodies that will not necessarily be pinpointed exactly by the app. So you sort of have to use deduction based on how they're situated relative to others in order to determine where they are. The thing that this game does really, really smartly is that you don't necessarily have to pinpoint where Planet X is in order to win the game. It's about the amount of information that you're able to ascertain in order to accumulate more points than other players. It does this cool thing about information sharing. It's a very, very, very cool game. That is the Search for Planet X.
This is my number one. I desperately want to play it because Neilan has endorsed it so much game. I've yet to play this, but I think that I'd like it, especially based on what you've said. So I'm going to ask you something, Neilan.
Mm-hmm.
Can you bring this to Dice Tower West? So we add to the
I will
list
do that. I will absolutely do that.
Oh my God.
West. My number 22 favorite game of all time is up 3 spots, and this is a shout out to the person who I know has it as number 1 on their list. At least I think it is on his list. Wogger's favorite game of all time, Lancaster. Lancaster is a game that falls into a silo of games that I love, which is old Euros that absolutely hold up. These are games that can sort of put you off based on how they look, but when you actually play them, you're like, wow, this game with a coat of paint could come out tomorrow and would just take the board gaming world by fire. Lancaster is a game that has a lot of stuff going on in it, but primarily it's a game of area control where you're placing your knights on different areas on the board to try to acquire resources or different actions and stuff like that. But the twist with it is that whenever you place your knight, they're assigned a numeric value, and whoever has the highest value at the end of a round is the one who claims the spot. But you can add squires, which are each worth a +1 to that spot. And so you can put a number down to increase your total. But if somebody places more to replace you, you get your knight back so you can replace them for that same round, but you lose all your squires. So it's a real sort of push your luck, test of wills thing. Yeah, ideally I would just put my knight, or I would just put my knight with the fewest number of squires so I'm not expending them. But if I only limp in, sort of like a poker analogy, if I only limp into this bid by raising a little bit and I get pushed out, I'm going to lose all the squires that I've just spent. And so I need to go hard immediately, but I don't want to go so hard that I lose all these squires. So it's just a, game of chicken that is done really, really well. Layer on top of that, the law system, which I love, which is every round a potential number of rules can be change in the game. So different things can all of a sudden be worth different things, or there can be different modifiers to the rules, and the way they are implemented or not implemented is based on a voting system with your other players. So it allows for this level of negotiation. So just a lot of really cool things going on in Lancaster, a game that I love playing. My 22nd favorite game of all time, up 3 spots. Shout out to Woggers.
I don't get it. I mean, I heard you, right? I listened to what you said. But
right.
It's like, I don't get why this one like doesn't. It's not showy. It doesn't have like the law thing is showy, but everything else is just like rock solid. You know what I mean?
But yeah, no, I agree.
Like,
I love that whole Squires. How high do you want to go? How much are you willing to sacrifice right now? And you might lose it all if somebody goes in harder than you.
It's like I get it as a good game. I just like the passion, the fiery passion, which, you love to see it. I'm a vampire for other people's passion. All right. My 22nd favorite board game of all time is a Reiner Knizia game. It is Babylonia, and it is better than Blue Lagoon. Babylonia is a 20-minute, like no lie, it's a 20-minute game if you're playing with an experienced group. And in this game, you are trying to score points by connecting different routes. It's very hard to describe. There are different types of temples and sites and different ways that you want to surround them to unlock special powers or to build unbroken chains. There are combos that are slowly building over the course of the game, and you are trying to get in each other's way to stop each other. There's considerations on how many tiles you can put on the board based on what type of tile you are putting out. This game is also beautiful. It has that essence of being like a game that has always existed to some degree. The scoring can be a little annoying, sure, I get it, but I'm willing to take that concession for a game that is just so smooth otherwise. Babylonia, one of my favorite board games ever made by the only true and living Dr. Reiner Knizia.
I don't think there's a game that I wanted to play more this year than Babylonia, because I've still only played it the once, and I wasn't really sure about it, but like I could sense that there was something there, but I just never got around to playing it in 2022. I could see this catapulting on my list with more plays, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's not as Euro-y as Blue Lagoon, which I like, and it's so short. I think it's shorter. It's just like, oh, we're halfway gone. Oh, it's 3/4 over. Like you could run it 3 times in an hour and you're just like, holy shit, the amount of game we've just gamed only can be had by Babylonia and the only true and living Doctor.
Speaking of the only true and living Doctor, this is probably the point in time where Kellen screams at me for saying that my favorite deck builder is the Quest for El Dorado.
Dominion!
I love Dominion. Like I said, it slipped off my list through lack of play, but what I love about Quest for El Dorado is it takes this abstractness of just building a deck for deck building's sake and turns it into, well, what are we doing with these cards? And what we're doing with these cards is we're racing. I love a game that sort of takes, hey, what if we instead moved away from just accumulating victory points as in Dominion and just said like, hey, the simple objective is get to this end of the map faster than anyone else. And that's exactly what Quest for El Dorado does. Each of the cards is a way to move yourself through the map, and doing that efficiently and planning your deck in such a way that you're able to pull up the right cards at the appropriate times to move through the map at the correct pace is vital. But there's also this fun game of blocking off spaces from other players. You're getting in each other's way in a way that just feels very interactive and really, really tense up to the last minute. That is Quest for El Dorado.
I love the Doctor, but the 2 games that for whatever reason I just can't connect with of his, although I appreciate that they're great, are Quest for El Dorado and Taj Mahal. I don't know what it is. Those 2 games just do not jive with me, but I appreciate the quality of them. Just not
2 of my favorite Knizia games, you monster.
It's the mini cards in Quest for El Dorado.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Neilan just have small hands, so like that doesn't bother him.
That's right. Whereas I have huge hands.
That's right. I mean, no need to brag, but they're huge.
Also, breaking news, the Vincent Dutray version of this is coming to English regions next year, and I'm very excited for that because there's a gorgeous looking production of this game.
That's cool.
This is the one, Neilan, there's a version of this where Neilan just messages me out of the blue, hey, do you have Quest for El Dorado, Golden Hexes or whatever? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, will you sell it to me? And I was like, what? Like, it was like completely out of the blue. I don't think that's ever happened with Neilan and I. And it's like so unusual. I'm just like, No? Question mark? Like, what? Why are we having this conversation right now?
I know that you're often willing to offload games, so I thought there was a chance.
Yeah, he's like poking and prodding at my collection.
All right. It's sad, but I have to end my list with game number 21, which was a heartbreak for me. It's dropped 9 spots on my list, although it's a fantastic game. The problem is I've played it too much at this point. I've played and played and played El Grande at this point, and I just feel like I'm a little burnt out. El Grande is like the area majority game. It's the original. It may not be the original, but it is like the granddaddy of area majority games. I know Eric Lang quotes it as among his like favorite and one of the inspirations for a lot of his area majority games, like Blood Rage and Rising Sun and all that. I love El Grande. It's a very straightforward game where it's a map of Spain divided into a number of different sections, and each round you are playing one of your power cards. The cards will determine the order of play. So if you play your 13, which is your highest card, you will go first. If you play 1, you will go last, and then the rest is determined by what your opponents pick. But if you go last, if you pick a low card, you get more of your workers to place into your active pool. Whereas if you go first, sure, you'll go first, but you get less workers to place out. So it's a give and take as to where you're going to go round to round. Furthermore, in addition to the turn order, whoever goes first will also be able to pick one of the action cards to play first. And the action cards break the rules of the game substantially. So every game, you know how it's generally going to work out. Like whoever has the most workers in any one province is going to score some number of points. But these power cards can make for wild breaking of the rules. In addition, there's the famous Castillo, which is a piece where instead of placing your workers on the different areas of the map, you can throw them in this Castillo, which is like a 3-dimensional castle. And that is not revealed until the end of the round. And you can place your workers wherever you want. So it's another added layer of surprise and changing the game at the last minute. So a game I love, but I've played it so much that I feel like I sort of know it backwards and forwards by now. So my 21st favorite game of all time, El Grande.
Yep, it's amazing.
Yep.
Talk about it in another week or so. My last game on this list, and sometimes favorably compared to El Grande, a riser on my list, 21, Rumble Nation. I find this game delightful. The central conceit is that you roll 3 dice, and you use 2 of them to decide what region you're placing cubes in, and then you use the 3rd dice by consulting a chart to determine how many cubes you get to place in that region. Then you are basically building up and building up and building up where your troops are, and the battles will all happen in a specific order. So like a coil that just springs once, yes, most coils can respring, but in a game of Rumble Nation, it twists down and then springs once, and then that is the full game. So this game is over lightning fast, 30 minutes or less, and the winner of battle will have reinforcement of troops that spill over into other regions. So it appeals to people with puzzle brains like Neilan, because they can sort of plan ahead for how things will work. It appeals to me on a tactical level because you never know where you're going to be able to place your troops, and sometimes you're just picking the worst of whatever options, trying to combine your dice in the perfect way to allow you to score. Does not overstay its welcome. Absolutely incredible game. Rumble Nation, my 21st favorite board game.
I've always loved your analogy of like a coiled spring for this game, because that is completely apt. I just wish I played this game more, and I wish I was better at it, because I feel like every time I play it, I get crushed.
It is weird when it's like one shot, because about halfway into it, you're like, man, this is not going to go well when this all resolves.
Yeah.
And like watching the machine not go well, like there's no way around it. It's about to go off and you're about to lose.
Yeah. And again, just to reiterate, Kellen's analogy of a coiled spring is like, you could not be more apt in an analogy for a game.
My 21st favorite game of all time is Decrypto, and astute listeners might have realized that this is the point where finally Decrypto has surpassed Codenames on my list. I think this is something I've been alluding to as an eventual possibility. Decrypto has kind of been slowly creeping up my list. Codenames has been slowly creeping down. I think for my taste, Decrypto is the game I want to play more often than not. And this is one of the weird things where a list like this sometimes falls apart. I think Codenames, for most people, will be a better game, even if I've mostly burned out at it. But Decrypto it's the more gamery version of this style of word game. Decrypto adds this delicious tension of giving clues that you want your team to be able to get, but at the same time, the other team is listening to those clues, getting those clues, and is going to be trying to figure out what your words are at the same time. And if you're able to guess the other team's words, that is part of your victory condition, as well as just the other team messing up on guessing their team's words is part of like a negative win condition. So there's this almost incredible tension as you're like ratcheting up the complexity and the relative ease of which your team is going to be able to get the clues you're given versus what the other team is going to be able to decipher. That I think works incredibly well in Decrypto.
Yes. I had an amazing game of Decrypto this year. Just loved it. Love, 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 love.
The only thing with Decrypto is I'm so eager to play it. I'm always so eager to play it, but I'm always scared off about the idea of playing it with non-gamers. Kellen has said that the way he teaches Decrypto is to tell people like, I know this might be confusing, but just we're going to play the first round. Don't ask any questions. We're just going to play it and go from there. And I think that's the right way to do it. But I'm always
amazing how many questions people still try to ask.
Even with that up front. Yeah, no, that's the one thing that scares me off. But I do love Decrypto.
Oh, I'm the host, and this episode has come to a close. I thought I got the last word, but that's not how this order system works. We do it in whatever way they do say it is to make me sound dumb. That is going to do it for this episode of the show where we counted down our 30th to 21st favorite board games of all time. Join us soon for a top 20 countdown. The 20 best board games of all time counted down by us, the Tanks. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Heart Society Music, for their song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album, Wake the Queens. Come bug us. Tell us what we're wrong about on our lists at the Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord or email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. Good evening and good night.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye and Happy New Year.
Opa.
Literally the same order every episode.
What is the order again?
I'm starting.
Oh, and then I'm in the middle.
That's right. You're the middle
And then
child
Neilan.
of the middle episode.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Neilan, why don't you kick us off with the third? No.
No.
Damn it. I was close. Okay, I was
You're one off.
one away.
Yeah.
One away. Games of all time. Join us soon for a top 20 countdown. The 20th best 20
Best?
the 20 best. I see. I was trying to add stuff to that. That was not the way to add that sentence. The 20 best board games of all time.